Hello, UCAR. Peter Christensen here, coming to you from the CEO's desk. We're going back into agency, and specifically buyer's agency. We're going to be focusing on the exclusive buyer-broker agreement and agency disclosure produced by the Utah Association of Realtors, mostly because it's the primary document used in agency relationships in residential sales in Utah, would be my guess. And it is the form I'm the most familiar with. So brokerages can have their own and have different versions, and some of them may even use this as a base and change a few things. Be aware of whatever version you're using. But anytime we enter into an agreement, I like to focus on a few questions. Who, for what, and then for how long. And those are kind of your basics in, and maybe you could add for what, at what cost, what are the obligations of the parties. Okay, that's kind of in the for what. Okay, who? Well, Section 1 of this agreement focuses on several of these, right? So the who. The buyer retains the company. The company is defined in the section above where you get to fill in who the company is. And then it says, we can also look, though, because it says including, and then it has a buyer's agent's spot to put a buyer agent's name. But then you have to couple that with 5.1 of this agreement, which says the buyer authorizes the buyer's agent or the broker to appoint another agent in the company to also represent the buyer in the event the buyer's agent or the broker will be unavailable. So right there, I mean, we know, okay, we're designating one agent. However, the buyer is agreeing that that agent could be swapped out, or someone else additionally could help if that were needed, right? And buyer's agreeing to that in 5.1. So that's the who, the buyer, and the company in general, which includes an agent that may or may not be swapped out. Okay, for what? It says right in there, to locate and or negotiate the acquisition of a property. And then you designate a property. Well, it's pretty broad, right? And you can put in, and you can have a county, or located at, and then a blank. So you can put a specific address. Now notice in that language, it says or. So in this county or the specific address. So this agreement could be used for one property only. It could be used for the entire state of Utah if you put in all the counties. So remember, though, you should not ever put both. That's confusing. If you're putting the address in, you don't need to put the county in. We already know what county it's in based on the address, so it's irrelevant. But if you put in both and then that buyer doesn't buy a specific property at a specific address, it gets confusing. Are they bound by this agreement if they buy a different property in that county? Because now a county and address are both listed. Don't fall for that. Don't do that. It's ambiguous. So remember, or, one or the other. Okay, and then for how long? Well, it says, okay, well, let's for what? The brokerage is picking up the fiduciary duties to represent the buyer, and it says that later, right? And then it says, but it says to help them find or acquire a property. Then it says, what's the buyer's obligation? Well, the buyer agrees not to enter into any competing buyer-broker agreements. So that's what do they have to do? And then in the next section, there's a brokerage fee attached to it. We'll go over that next. But for now, those are the obligations of the party in general. For how long? Well, it gives you a term, right? You can fill in that section 1 a time when that will be conducted, right? And right in there, it says, 5 p.m. on this date that this agreement will end, or when the buyer acquires or the closing of a property. Now notice it says a property. So if if the intent of the parties was multiple properties, then you got to amend this agreement to indicate that, because this is meant to end when they purchase a property or when the time period ends, when the term of the agreement as agreed upon ends. So this was some basics of how this is why you need to go through these with your buyer and in detail, so they understand all these terms. What am I getting into? For how long? What are your obligations? What are my obligations? That's all covered in the first section right there. Hopefully it's helpful. Remember, this is not legal advice. This is legal information only. If you need specific legal advice, please contact your attorney. Thanks for tuning in.